Hello, everyone, to this third appointment within our journey into boundaries. Today, we are going to be talking about sexual boundaries. But before we start covering this topic, I want to welcome Rachel. Hi, Rachel, how are you?
Hi, Letitia. Yeah, it's good to be back and to be talking about this particular boundary because, well, boundaries are important, with our friends and our family and etc. But this one is really important because it's about our intimate relationships.
Totally agree with you, Rachel. And sexual boundaries are about our intimate sphere, an area of our life that unfortunately we get little or nothing at all knowledge and education about it in our mid childhood adolescence periods. It is in fact one of the most taboo topics within family,
Yeah.
and whether it's for religious reasons, whether it's because of it's considered something to be dealt with when we are older, whether it's because our parents in turn have had no explanation from their parents and simply don't know how to do it with us. So eventually we get to experience this topic through the outside world thanks to movies, internet, advertisements. In short, we are bombarded with messages around us in which sex seems to be the main sensory engine of human society. Just see how we often find advertisement of any kind in which the main icon is the woman's body. Of course, I come from a different generation than the current one, but I personally have experienced a double and confusing message around sexuality. So I will talk about my situation. On one hand, I had the message of my mother that she was deeply religious, who viewed the sexual act as something sinful and had to be done within marriage or for procreative purposes, and a father, on the other hand, whose entrepreneurial activity was centered around everything related to sex. So, if you're wondering how these two individuals managed to stay in a relationship, I would say that they didn't. They just long enough to have two children. So, from this highly contradictory message, what I had deduced was that sexuality was simply a boring physical act necessary for male release due to its biological nature. And me, as a woman, I was just the vehicle of that pleasure from which I would receive that sentimental bond in return.
Mm.
So, although my adolescence and youthful vision was a bit twisted, now as a professional trauma and codependency, I see many similarities, even if they are younger than me. So, it's not just related to my generation.
Yeah, I mean, actually, my experience was very different to yours, Letitia. My upbringing. I mean, sex in my family was really never spoken about. I learned really only from school and from friends, maybe the occasional book that I might have found. I don't know, and it really only ever covered the basics, and there was nothing, there was nothing more to it. It certainly didn't talk about pleasure. So for me, sex was just this act that happened between two people, and yeah, you made babies from that act. Yeah, and I think that might
Yeah,
still be the case today. That there's still that in sexual education. It still might be as basic as that.
yeah, because sexuality today, I would say in general, is it might be seen as a physical performance aimed at mere pleasure. In reality, sexuality is something that goes beyond that
Yeah.
because through it we express our primal drive to connect with another being on a deeper and more intimate level. And what makes us different from our animal companions as far as sex is concerned is that we are endowed with something more than them, which is pleasure, as you were saying, and as we were saying before. So, to recap, sex is a biological impulse where we seek pleasure and connection. So, it's not just this biological impulse. Therefore, I would like our audience to try to ask themselves the following question in situation where they are having sex. Do you do it with pleasure or do you feel pleasure? What is the purpose when you do it? Just a physiological urge? a search for physical connection, and other than this physical satisfaction after the intercourse, do you feel satisfied in that connection in other ways?
Oh, I love that, Letitia, that we, because we can learn so much, right, from about ourselves with using powerful questions. It really gets us to just like pause and take a moment and to reflect and to like really be honest with ourselves, and I'll start asking ourselves, how is it that I really do feel about this situation? Great.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, if the answer is no to all or some of those questions that I've just done, the issue of boundaries arises because we have to remember that we are talking about boundaries.
Yeah.
And this issue arises because what kind of rules and guidelines have you established around sexuality? What is okay for you and what is not?
Yeah.
How familiar are you with your physical sensation? Is your body important and sacred or just a physical tool to be given to anybody? My questions are all gender related, and I'm not asking this question to women and not to men, because even to those who think that in their search for casual sex there is only a physical release, I want to insist that as human, we all seek connection. Unless you have a mental disorder, disease like a sociopath or a psychopath, we are not talking about it. We are just talking about whatever is considered their normality.
Yeah. And I think also I'd just like to highlight something, an important point here, Letitia, which is that the level of connection that you can obtain with your, and I'm talking now in a relationship with your partner, is very much dependent on that level of connection that you actually have with yourself. So if you're not fully connected to yourself, you will not be able to have that rich, deep, and kind of meaningful relationship with somebody else. Um, and to actually have a deeper connection with yourself means that you actually need to learn then, truly who you are emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually. um, and then when you go to actually seek for that connection with another person, you will attract someone who is right for you, rather who can, or let's say who can then meet you on equal terms. um, I find really that when we're disconnected, from my own experience, that we then don't value our bodies in the same way, and so when we are having a loving relationship with ourselves, and so this opens us up to really kind of behave in ways that can lead us to those feelings of guilt and shame. I know from my personal experience. And so, for example, if you feel in some way unlovable, then you're going to be far more likely to mistaken sex as basically an avenue to try and be loved. That's been my experience.
Oh, listen, it's my experience as well. In my day, but also in some cultures, and today, we were raised in a society where men were taught that the most available, culturally acceptable way for them to initiate a connection and feel close to someone they like is through physical intimacy.
Yeah.
So man, in theory, should be the initiator and the one who pushes towards the physical approach. And I grew up in this society. I knew that this was the main traits
Mm.
of a man. Let's say that. And me as a woman, I oftentimes I felt like cornered when this moment was arriving. One of the issue and that my clients face after working for a while on their recovery from codependency and starting the dating process again is how to manage their own boundaries related to sex. And I have to work on myself as well. And the typical question is, what they say is like, I've been dating this person for a couple of times. I like her, I like him, but I'm still not comfortable having sex. And
Mm.
I would like to get to know him better. However, this person is starting to make physical advances. So um, I don't know what to do and say. I don't want him to run away, but at the same time, I would like to stand up for my values. So Now, journey this can open to different scenarios. One with weak boundaries, where the fear of saying no equals to the fear of being rejected. As you were saying, of being abandoned, of feeling different from others, of being laughed at. One of my fear was that this guy was laughing at me, like saying, like, what? Are you coming from the century? Of not being accepted. So people like me in the past, they agreed to have sex, hoping deep down that by doing so, they can open the door to a new relationship. If this doesn't happen, it the growing feelings of shame, as we were saying, shame will be masked or numbed by the false narrative that it's normal to have casual sex, that one is not looking for, that I'm not looking for a relationship, and that is only a physical pleasure, and the heart is not involved. But that's only a mask. That's something, that's a narrative that we are saying to ourselves just to cover the shame we are feeling, because we knew that I knew back in time, and I know so many people who are in the same situation, that they were not really doing because they felt comfortable to do it, but they were hoping to get something, to get a deeper connection with the other person, which that can be translated into a relationship. Um, so but if we're only about physical pleasure, one could just as easily do it without a physical presence, right? I mean, if we are we saying to ourselves this narrative about, oh, I'm just doing because I'm seeking for pleasure? Well, you might not need a human connection. You can just do it on your own, right? If it's only for that physical pleasure. Then I was saying that the other scenario is someone who perceives that they are being treated as a physical object and puts up huge walls.
Yeah.
In this case, it can go from an extreme reaction, stopping contact with the other person there, or recriminating the person, mistaking assumption that they have our consent to have sex outside the relationship. So you have this situation where, what do you think? Do you think that I will have sex if I'm not, they have sex around with any man without a relationship? I'm not that kind of person. So there are these people that, or they start blaming, recriminating the assumption of the other person, and they might even negotiate sex in exchange for a commitment. And these are the classic situations where, when viewed from the outside, you can see that one side is looking for connection, and the other side is looking for safety within that connection. Here I'm excluding any serious sexual abuse, and I'm not talking about, we are just talking about, let's say, a normal situation where there is no abuse involved. So the dynamic that I was telling before here is, you want sex, I will give it to you if you give me the safety of a commitment, of the commitment that I'm looking for. So maybe the other party will perhaps say yes to you because they feel pressured to negotiate a relationship just to feel connected to you. And when the two of them, they get what they want, so one got a yes, you get my commitment, the other one get the sex, maybe the other part, the one that felt pressured, didn't feel like that there something was missing, and maybe doesn't want to go on with the relationship, and they just leave. So um, and then both of them, they didn't get really what they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you've just talked about then um, is why I'm very much, for in my teachings and in coaching with my clients, that we really need to be engaging in this practice of self-love and self-respect um, through boundary setting, because it does actually become the antidote to shame and to disconnection. Boundaries can also help us to feel safe enough to courageously and honestly show up every day in our relationships. In every relationship, there is always this space in which we share, and each person in that relationship has a right to take up an equal amount of space in it. And if we fail to set those boundaries or have them, or even have them heard, then more often than not, and I speak here more from maybe women. I don't know. Because I'm a woman, I can't maybe speak so much for men. We end up spending a lot more time in our head, rather than actually in our body. And that's not really the great recipe, is it now, for sex, and having a loving relationship? Because eventually, what will happen is it will lead to avoidance sex, avoiding it altogether. A better and less maybe upsetting for your partner is
with the headache excuse.
yeah, with the headache excuse, yeah. Or people saying, don't they, I just like lay back and think of England, or that's the expression that we used to use in England anyway. A better and less upsetting, shall we say, for your partner is to really have like maybe 1 or 2 minute of a possibly awkward but worthwhile conversation with what your sexual needs are. Men and women have the right to like what they like, and they also have the right to say no when it's basically something that they find uncomfortable. It just doesn't suit them. And this is what is great about boundaries, because and discussing boundaries, because it actually means that nobody has to do anything that they don't like. But it's also true, however, that we are emotional beings. We mustn't forget that. And that can mean that we will all have moments of just like, well, I just don't feel like it. I'm not feeling it today. And then the next day, you're totally up for it. And that's because we're not robots.
Yeah.
I also believe that a majority of the time, honesty is always the best policy. It's something I think that we all need to start to embrace more and learn not to basically just shy away from the truth. If you're not honest, then you may not be exposed to things if you're not honest, then you're going to be exposed to things that leave you either feeling degraded, that will maybe trigger a trauma of some kind, or trigger an old trauma. It will increase a sense of division between you and your partner, because you feel you're not listened to, so you start to withdraw in the relationship, or you lose that sense of pleasure in having sex. It's like it becomes the duty. It's like, well, this is what we'll do once a month, to keep him happy or whatever.
Oh wow, once a month.
Yeah. Or lose sight of the fact of lose sight of yourself, who you are in the relationship. And even boredom, I think that's another one. I hear a lot of people that I get into conversations with. It's not that I'm talking sex all the time, but when it does pop up in a conversation, people will be like, it's boring. It's become just a thing that we do. And then there's this like makeup sex. And sometimes I think that makeup sex can be a bit confused for also as running away from the truth, after an argument, that you never actually talk about the argument. You just you have sex as a way to get over the argument, but you never address the argument. That's maybe not great. So yeah, being honest and upfront in conversations with any potential partner, for me, is where where do your boundaries lie, and that will help you to prevent being put in a situation that is uncomfortable further on down that line. And also to define your boundaries, you of course need to know your sexual needs and your limitations. And remember, it's always an ongoing discussion. It's not something that you have once and it never happens again, because over time with your partner, you might actually find that you're discovering new boundaries or new sexual interests that you didn't have in the early days of your relationship, or you did have in the early days of your relationship, and now you've got older and things maybe don't feel quite the same way. So maybe it's a good point, Letitia, now to move on to some tips for establishing sexual boundaries.
Yeah.
I'd like to start
Yeah.
maybe just to share some that are whilst you're in the relationship. Um, so, firstly, I think let's be clear about your do's and don'ts. Where you don't like to be touched, how much foreplay you need, before intercourse, for example. If you don't like something or you're not in the mood, it's okay to say so. You can tell your partner no as frequently as you like. It doesn't, you shouldn't use it though to deny your partner the means to have sex, because then you'll only end up really hurting yourself and your integrity. Um, Another tip is you and your partner have the right to your needs, but you also are not required to fill them. Each of us have lines that we're not willing to cross, and very much applies to our bedroom activity, which very much applies to our bedroom activities. And I also think start a casual conversation when you're out having a drink, having a cup of coffee or whatever, just say, hey, what is it that you enjoy? Are you enjoying our sex life? What is it that you don't like? And then just see where it goes. You might learn something new about your partner. Determine a frequency. This is also something that for men and women is it can be very different, I think, and it's
It
different for every couple. You might hear one couple who talks about the fact that they're at it all the time and, 3 times a week. And you're sitting there thinking, well, we only do it once a month. It doesn't mean that your sex is going to be any less of quality. It just means that your frequency is different. That's it. Don't make such a big song and dance about it. That's would be my my tip. Um, Create a pleasure list. This is an interesting one, where you have like 3 columns and you put yes, everything that you like, the no's, and then like the maybes. It helps to visualize those boundaries, and it's a good conversation talk, over a glass of wine or whatever.
is this
Uh,
something that you do with your partner, or you just do it on your own?
I think do it for yourself first, because that can help you with actually understanding what are your what are your limitations, what are you up for. It gets you to start thinking, and then yeah, why not share that with your partner and let them know, and ask them to do one. So yeah. Um, and another thing is like, I mean, okay, in the movies they like to like, everything is done on the moment and it's passion and it's just spontaneous. But there may be times when you just want to have a quick chat and get clear on, what are we up for here? Are we like, having a quickie 5-minute one, or is this going to be an hour one? you know, what's working for you today? What are we up for? Because sometimes, one might go in with one thinking this is going to be a 5-minute, and the other thinks, oh great, I'm gonna lie back and have an hour session, and it's not the case. uh, so having a clear way to communicate no, I think is last what I just want to last mention, because if you are experimenting, maybe it's important to be able to have what you call the safe word, because you don't, you might feel uncomfortable to go into a full conversation about why it's not. You just want to say one word and they just know, okay, I just need to stop, but I can continue elsewhere.
Mm.
So yeah, that's my little tips. That is, yeah. What's yours?
Oh, thank you so much. I loved your tips. Well, for my part, I would like to give some advice to those who are not in relationship and find themselves having to manage their sexual boundaries with people they don't know yet very well. Okay, so I will start by saying the jokes of sexual and heavy-handed natures are already a sexual violation, and there's no right to allow them. So if you feel uncomfortable, just say no. Just be stand up and say, I don't feel comfortable around these jokes. However you're gonna take it, I don't feel comfortable. And if they keep on doing that, you just go away from this situation. And another tips that I would like to give, in now we are in the age of dating apps. I My advice to consider carefully whether it is appropriate to go too far in using sexual language during chats, because you might find yourself in an uncomfortable situation at the time of the physical encounter,
Yeah.
and it could give the idea of tacit consent. So be careful to what you say before in chats that you might regret if you meet this person, because for the other side, maybe you already passed that initial situation and you can move on directly to something else that maybe you might not be ready for. um,
Yeah,
and
give
then
them wrong signals. Yeah.
yeah, the wrong signal. And then defend your desire to want protected sex if the other party doesn't seem inclined to do so. You have every right to protect yourself from sexually transmitted diseases and to avoid unwanted pregnancies. So, whatever they say to you, if you want to have protected sex, you just say it. If they don't want, you just leave. It's a no. This is off limit, should be an off limit situation. And for the situation I was mentioning before, when you are already dating someone, but and then the person pushes you to have sex, but you don't feel ready, be honest with that person involved and put the connection at the center of the new relationship, because this is what both of you want, right? The man was taught that the connection should happen through sex, and for you connection is more about getting to know someone. So in this case, um, puts the connection at the center of this new relationship, at the center of what you both want. Like to create a connection, a strong connection. In this way, you are planting seeds. And when beautiful flowers grow, it is worth building a fence to protect it. I mean, it's worth it to have a relationship, a commitment. But if you build a fence first, but the soil hasn't been plowed and seeded, the commitment just seems like a restriction. And it's something that has been built out of fear rather than love. So in this case, to deflect a sexual proximity, you could simply say that you prefer more connection before taking the following step. No one in this case will feel pressured to give a false commitment, because you are not asking for a relationship. You are asking just for a connection. For more dating, to build a connection together, going out more, doing more things together. And on the other side, and you will feel, whenever you will feel ready, you might have sex or you might not have. So none of the two will feel pressured. But just be honest and put the connection at the center. So, and again, boundaries around sex, boundaries is something that um, you need to establish before with yourself. It's something that is so intimate because it's about your body, it's about your pleasure. So I go back to the question that I was asking before. What kind of rules and guidelines have you established around yourself and sex? What is okay, what is not okay? What is your idea of your body in relation to sex? And how does it feel? Is your body a tool for physical pleasure, or is your body something that allows you to get more into an intimate connection? So first, have a clear idea about you, your body, and sex, and then you know how. And then once you give more self-love or self-respect to your body and to yourself, probably will know how to deal with boundaries outside for an external world, in the external world. So is there anything else that you would like to add, Rachel?
No, only the thing that was coming up was, reinforcing the fact that, you know, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And, you know, if you keep that in mind, that getting into evolving into a relationship, yeah, you need to speak up, you need to talk, you need to explain to someone what you're all about so that they can meet you where you want to be met. So
And I want just to specify that when we are talking about men and when we are talking about women, is now we are not just talking about heterosexual situations, because when we are talking about men, we are referring to the masculine energy and to the feminine energy. We all have both of them. There might be one that is more dominant than the other one. So when we are saying that the man comes from Mars, is we are talking about the masculine energy. So, and the drive of the masculine energy and the drive of the feminine energy, right?
yeah, we can be on both. Men and women can be on either planet. That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah,
We standing one in more than the other. And that also changes there, Letitia. That's you know, you might be very much in your feminine in the early years, and you move more into your masculine as you get older, or vice versa. So nothing is not everything is always moving in life. So
yeah,
yeah.
totally, totally. So I think that it's time to close our conversation and remind our audience that the next time we will be covering the topic of material boundaries. So when we talk about material boundaries, we are talking about our possessions, but we're gonna talk in depth next time. So if you like this video, please press the like button and subscribe to our channels. You will find the link to our channels in our social media in the description below. And for now,
Ciao.
it's bye, ciao, and see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye bye.